Okay, so in this video, we are going to look at creating an object-oriented programming solution for our Java application. The Java application which uses user interface as well as connects to a Microsoft Access database. So for this, obviously for object-oriented programming, we need to have the base classes to represent our entity. If you remember our entity structure, it was presented in the previous sections. We had this kind of a structure in our database. A table student was used to keep the student's information, and table registration was used to keep the registration details of their absenteeism, etc., in another table referenced to the referring the table student. So in this section, we are going to move on. So we finished the user interface in our previous sections. Now we are designing the solution. Only after we design the object oriented solution do we move on to coding it and then testing it. So these are the three phases that are left over in our little project. Okay. So for us to design our solution, we look at our table structure and we see that we have a student table. So we design a UML class diagram to represent a student object. So that's the name of the class. These are the properties of that class. Now, these properties obviously come from our database. So student ID, name, surname, date of birth, email, and grade. So the same properties are replicated over here with appropriate data types to represent the type of data that is present. You may use a date time object, or you can use a string object for the date of birth and manipulate it that way. We need to have a constructor, a parameterized constructor to set the student object from the values that you're going to read from the database, a toString method that will return a formatted string with the details of each student. Then the second class that we are going to have is for the second table, which is the registration table that shows which student registered when, where they present, do they have a note if absent, and what are the note details. So we have the same properties over here with appropriate data types. So the yes no value in Microsoft Access will be represented with a Boolean value in Java programming. We have a parameterized constructor again for the register object. We have a toString method again to represent it in a neat format. Then we move on to the array class, which will give us the list of all the student objects and all the registers that are present. So for that, I create an array data structure. I call the first one array students, which is an array of students. I'm keeping the size as 25 for now. I created another array called array of registers, which is an array of the register class that we will create later. And the register is slightly bigger because each student will register on many days. So this needs to be much higher than the number of students we have. A size integer variable to keep track of how many students you have in the array of students and how many registers you have in the array of registers. So two separate size integer variables. A default constructor which will run a SQL query into the Microsoft Access database and load these array of objects for us. Then I have added a few methods. Now, these methods, how do we decide what method to add? So that now depends on your screen design. So if you go back to our screen, you look at the functions that are available. So first function that the user can click on or use is to view today's absentee list. For that, you will have to provide a method that will retrieve the absentee list of today from these arrays that you have populated. So for now, I'm just saying, okay, there's a method called get today's absentee list. It will return us a string. How it will do its job, I will explain when we code. The next function you have in your screen is to view all items about the register, the students, etc. So I create another method called get all, which returns a string. The next function I've added is to allow the user to search for the register of a particular date or to see the details of a particular student. So for that, I've created two methods. One is to search by date and one is to search by surname. So that's here, search by date. Now when you search by date, you need to know which date. So that date that you are going to search by is going to be a parameter to this method, and the method is going to return as a string. The search by surname method will return as a surname. Sorry, will take in a parameter surname as a string parameter surname, and then return a string wave text of the details of that particular student's registration status. Then in the next screen, we said that we are going to allow the user to enter a new register, or mark a student absent or present. For that, all this information needs to be captured, and all this information was actually based on the information that is present in the registration table. So we need to know which student, what is the date, are they present, do they provide us a note, and what are the details in the note as well. So we have all the controls that will allow the user to enter those values, and based on that, when they click on this add button, a method needs to be called in the array class that will do the job of inserting that record into the registration table for us. So add register is the method. The method takes all these parameters, and based on this we will insert. So if you would like, you can return a boolean value to say, okay, registration was successful or not, or you can leave it as empty. I would prefer if it was returning a value boolean to show whether the adding process was successful or not. So this is how you design your solution. Okay, thank you.